Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we will cover on Microsoft Purview. We're joined today by Julius Damato, who heads up our Microsoft products here at ECI. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have a question and answer panel, so if you'd like to put your questions in there. We also have chat is available and enabled for this conversation. So please feel free if you have questions, put them in there. I will gently interrupt Julius, and I'm sure he's more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But with that, I will turn it over to Julius so you can walk us through what Microsoft Purview has to offer.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Hello, everybody. Again, Julius Damato, Director for Microsoft Modern Work and AI Solutions here at ECI. We're going to cover quite a bit about Purview today. We're going to go through just a brief introduction of what Microsoft Purview is, kind of do some level setting on what it is as a technology, how it can benefit you if you're licensed appropriately. We'll talk about everyone's favorite topic, license requirements, so we can ensure that you have the appropriate license to get the features that you're looking for. We'll cover the data governance and security capabilities, and then finally wrap up with some practical usage on how we're seeing it being adopted, how Microsoft recommends you do it to a certain degree, and then really where we're seeing it move forward as a technology in its own right. We're going to talk about several different pieces as well, not just Microsoft Purview. So I will pepper that in where it comes in there, just so that you have a general understanding of kind of what products overlap with Purview, because Purview does have several different layers to it and does have some prerequisites for certain feature sets. So let's kind of get rolling. So what is Microsoft Purview? So Microsoft Purview is, for all intents and purposes, the previous compliance portal. For those who are unaware, Microsoft purchased the organization called Purview. I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago now. It's been quite a bit. But it was a platform that integrated very closely with Microsoft, and they've purchased it, merged it all together, and now it's one big happy ecosystem. But it's Microsoft's set of solutions is kind of the way that it's pitched to help you govern, protect, and manage data across various levels of environments, various infrastructures. So that could be data you have on-prem, it could be data that's in multi-clouds, it even can cover some SaaS environments and so some SaaS platforms if you have them, and it combines the data governance, data security, risk, and compliance solutions in one unified platform. So it really can ensure that you're applying the same set of controls and practices across your data estate, across your enterprise, so that you're not just putting a little bit here, put a little bit there, or have mismatched controls. You can make sure everything is unified, everything is connected, and the same controls are being followed kind of across. To highlight that, just to talk very briefly about the capabilities, for those who are unaware, Purview has data discovery and classification features that's there to help you classify and discover data across your environment, again, to ensure that you can manage and protect it. The data cataloging is there, so to help you better understand your data landscape and your data estate, and then find out where it is, who has access to it. There's a data access and sharing aspect of it, which does help you find and identify who has access to what, and then how it's being shared, where it's being shared. DLP, data loss prevention, is there to help prevent data breaches and ensure that you're meeting your compliance requirements if you have them, as well as protect any sensitive data from potential threats. Insider risk management is there to help mitigate and detect internal threats, whether that is intentional or not, and help prevent data exfiltration. And then finally, a lot of people aren't aware that you do get, depending on your licensing, access to regulatory assessments. You get 3 included with the Microsoft 365 E5 license. And I'll cover a little bit of what that is a little bit later. So to talk about license requirements, as I said, everyone's favorite topic. This big, beautiful chart that you have on screen is really the core features that a lot of clients are looking for. There's a couple things here that are missing around Microsoft Defender, what you're doing for Windows 11 or Windows 10 Enterprise, and etc. That is kind of built into the Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 license. But in order for you to take full advantage of Purview, you do need Microsoft 365 E5 licensing. That'll give you data lifecycle management. It'll give you all the e-discovery and auditing capabilities with Audit Premium and e-discovery Premium. It'll give you all the advanced all the advanced insider risk management features around adaptive protection, privilege access management, etc. And then you do get full access to Microsoft's CASB solution through Cloud Access Security Broker, and that'll give you Cloud App Defender, Cloud App Security, Cloud App Discovery, and etc. There's also another version of Purview that often does get confused. That's Purview inside of Azure. That's where you get your data landscape, your data estate, your data mapping. That is an enterprise add-on. So you do have to pay to up from the built-in Microsoft Purview license to that enterprise solution, as well as you do need compute credits in order to be able to process data. I can talk to any customers that you may be interested in doing kind of a data landscape, but about 90 to 95% of the clients I talk to are happy with what comes out of the box with you get set up with Microsoft 365 E5 and the Purview options. You can do a mismatch of the E5 security and compliance licensing. You'll see that a little bit there. Everyone here will get access to this presentation as well. So you'll be able to look at this and see what features are in line with that security or compliance license. So if you want to stick with your Office 365 with 385 and then layer that in to get some of the feature set, that is an option. However, usually when you start looking at costs, it just makes more sense to step into the E5 license, as you can do a license consolidation and get rid of your enterprise mobility and security licensing. You can bring in your governance licensing and etc. kind of all in one place. So let's talk about some of the capabilities around governance and the security. So it's broken up into three kind of core areas: your data discovery, classification, and privacy. So for data classification, Microsoft Purview automates the data discovery by scanning and classifying data that lives in your data estate. This is done automatically inside of Microsoft 365 if you are licensed appropriately and you have that turned on. So it's a very easy way to get identification of where your data is. I will preface here that although you turn on the features in Purview, that does not give you the privilege to view the data or run the reports. Those are dedicated roles in the Purview portal that are managed completely separate from the other Entra ID roles that exist. So global admins don't have default access to that. You do need to assign the specific Purview roles to be able to do that. That is there obviously for security and so that you can build certain reports to give access to certain parts of your compliance or your data custodians access to specific areas of the Purview portal. For the data mapping, that again is part of that enterprise Purview piece, but you do have the ability to get a comprehensive map of your data estate, and that'll look everywhere. So if you're connected Box, Dropbox, you're looking at your SQL databases, etc. For data or metadata, it does have the ability to map that for you. That requires compute credits. A lot of what is in Purview is driven through AI. So Copilot, of course, is in there to a degree, but a lot of it is leveraging built-in tools in the Purview portal that are all automated to be able to give you that data. It does centralize and do unified data governance, so you're able to, again, centralize your controls cross-platform, not just in the Microsoft space, but as well as to the other data pieces. And then you're able to build a data lineage and transform your data and define dependencies. Again, that is an enterprise feature, though. For data discovery, Microsoft does have a little over 200 built-in system classifiers that are available. If you're licensed for E5, you can define custom classifications by uploading a subset of your data to the platform for identification, and then you can build your trainable classifiers and your EDMs and etc. based on that. With sensitivity labels, that's your ability to label data, whether it be manually or an automatic way there. And then there are both automated and AI-powered classifiers that are included with the E5 licensing, again, to accelerate you identifying your data and finding it without the need for someone to sit there and sift through and do a lot of manual data connection. From a data privacy perspective, it's broken up to a couple of different areas. DLP is always the top of mind, and that's really there to help protect sensitive information from risky and unauthorized access in accordance with your company policies or however you have defined your compliance policies. Your information protection policies are there to, again, discover, classify, and protect sensitive data. It's a little bit different than your DLP policies, as information protection prevents the data from leaving in its own right, and that can be extended to endpoints if you have Defender deployed, whether that be in passive mode or in active mode. For those curious, there are privacy risk management identifiers that are available. You can configure that both with the enterprise and the standard version. It's just called a little bit different in the standard version of Purview, but you can do privacy risk management if you have data that is super sensitive that you don't want leaving, whether it be PII, banking numbers, etc. With the compliance assets, again, as I mentioned, there's built-in reports that you can run. They doesn't automatically do remediation, but you do have the ability to look at where you're not meeting those regulatory compliance, and then it does give you suggested controls in order to enable that from that regard as well. And then the last two, which are super important, is regarding data lifecycle management and insider risk management. So data lifecycle management, especially in the world of AI, is becoming important just around what you're doing from ensuring your data isn't stale, it isn't getting old, and your existing data sets do meet your legal, business, privacy, and regulatory content obligations. So if you say you purge old data after 7 years, you can build a policy around that and purge specific data types, or if you want to purge everything that has a specific data label or specific classification, you have that flexibility. And then insider risk management, again, is there to detect, investigate, and act on internal risks, whether that be both unknown or known, or intentional or unintentional on the end user perspective.
Julius, quick question we had come in. Does this cover structured data sets residing within various backends?
Yes, so that to do that, you with the base Purview, as long as your SQL databases are stored in Azure and they are set up as holy smokes, I cannot remember the name right now. If they are SQL as a service, where you're not running a dedicated VM to handle that, that is where you can connect it to the Purview with the E5 licensing and run those classification and data labeling such as against those databases. It's just a quick connector that gets established. If you have data sitting in an actual VM running SQL services, whether that's on-prem or in Azure or in AWS, etc., that requires the enterprise version of Purview. It is an annual fee to upgrade. It's a monthly fee to upgrade to the enterprise version of Purview, and then you do need those compute units. The compute units vary on size depending on effectively how quickly you want things to work, and if you want things to be near real time, and those are purchased in buckets. If you want to have a separate call to talk through some of that, if you have specific services that you want to look to have covered, happy to bring that up and talk you through that as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. So let's talk about practical usage. How are we seeing it done? What are some of the things you should be thinking about as you kind of go along in this journey, and go from there? I do see your question, Oleg. I'll answer it real quick because it is relevant. It does have the ability to cover those databases. Again, if they're running on SQL servers or in AWS, etc. Most third-party softwares now have available connectors to connect directly to Purview, but if not, you can connect directly to the VM and get the agent running to collect that data. Again, it would require to enterprise version at that point in order to get that. So it really just depends on how sensitive you think that you have data in those databases and whether or not you want to have those extra coverages there. So for data discovery, things to keep in mind is, where's your data live? Is it in Microsoft 365 or using third-party cloud solutions such as Box, Dropbox? Do you have data in AWS you want to protect? Odds are you have data that sits on endpoints that should be protected, whether they're online or offline. Those are things to think about, as you can extend coverage to endpoints and enable endpoint DLP. That'll give you pieces such as forensic evidence building. You can tie it into insider risk management. You can really have the endpoints act as agents and able to scan and review and do their own data sets from that regard. And then you can also do something very similar with on-prem servers, whether that be running on a file server or etc. And then you really want to look at what type of data do you want to have classified. And a part of that is identifying and educating users that the data owner is becoming more responsible, right? When we talk about IT in the last 20 years, it was always an email to IT to give Jimmy access to this, grant them access to that. Over the last few years, and especially with AI now, there's this increased acceleration around the data owners and the departments owning their data and empowering them and ensuring they understand that and know what to do in certain instances. We can build alerts, we can configure all of the automation behind that, but the data owners in those departments really should be driving some of the decisions on what they should be doing with their data, not for the whole business, but more important with their own data and identifying that. They can help build trainable classifiers if they're looking for specific data sets. You can configure sensitive information types around that as well. So if you're looking for PII, if you're looking for account numbers, US passports, credentials sitting in emails or Word documents, things of that nature, that is all stuff you can classify. It's all stuff that you can find. And then that does tie into how you build those policies, as you can do that as exact match. You can do it as where it's calculated, etc. So you have the ability to be flexible on how you build the data discovery piece along with the data classification. A good thing to keep in mind, and really now is kind of the time to start thinking about it, especially as Copilot and other AI tools are accelerating this, is what you're doing from an information architecture. You really should be reviewing that on an annual basis. I'm sure you all say that you do to some degree, but you really do need to put more attention on this. You can do a lot with the Microsoft tools. You can tie it into conditional access. You can have purview action things, as I mentioned, on endpoints. You can restrict how remote access works. You can restrict access to SaaS platforms. There's a lot that you can do, and understanding where your data is important, and as well as what functionality you want out of that data. Your data is your intellectual property, right? That is your biggest selling point. It is what makes you money. It's what makes us money. And really getting your data to work for you is really the key here. So importantly, with that is how are end users consuming the data? How many of your users know how to get data, where to find it? Do you have tools there to help users find it? And then really start thinking about, is it difficult to maintain your data? How often are you having either ECI or your current provider run these reports and give you get you who has access to what data sets? As we've done this move to SharePoint Online and these other Box, Dropbox, etc., it's really important that you're doing continual review on who has access to that data, because when you create share links, if you have that enabled, it's not necessarily something that's immediately known as to where that's being tracked. If you're using SharePoint and someone clicks on any one of this organization links and creates those share links for data, that's data that everyone in the organization can access, and all someone has to do is click it or get it forwarded to them or get a copy of it, and now that's information that they have. So understanding what those are, where they are, is important. You can do that with Entra ID access reviews. That's a part of the E5 licensing. It's something we configure as well as a part of our services. And then with SharePoint Advanced Management, that's been recently been updated again with additional reports to help you identify those things, action them. And really, again, both of these are designed to make data owners aware of where their data is, who has access to it, and then have them be proactive about who should and who shouldn't have access to it. And in both of these, you can also control guest access to that. So if someone was only supposed to have access to something for 30 days, and that you can very easily identify if that's something that's not being enforced or something that's not being actioned and remediated in real time. It also, both of those have automated action items that you can do on that. So you can say if someone isn't responding to these, automatically remove people or send it to someone internally to do a final review before it's forced removed. So you do have flexibility on those. So you're not just like removing your CEO's ability to access documents he probably wants. But that is stuff, again, if somebody shouldn't have access to it, they probably shouldn't have a link to it or should be added to it. When you start talking about now data classifications and sensitivity labels, a lot of people I talk to are either deploying the Microsoft standards because it's a very quick click a button, run in the portal, and it'll deploy it for you. In my experience and in talking with peers in the industry, that has really turned into a confusing endeavor for end users. And that's really leading to people being frustrated with it, not understanding really the importance of what they're doing, getting low adoption on that change. And in our experience with working with customers, and again, talking with peers in the industry, you really want to start looking at it from and building 4 sets of labels and look at it a couple different ways. So your first set is really your most sensitive data. So that usually a group of data that you want to have rules applied to them regardless of what it is. That could be your financial statements. Excuse me, that could be data that HR is handling. That can be, reporting, et cetera, that you want to ensure cannot leave. It's not accessible outside of the people that have access to it. For somewhat sensitive data, a lot of times it works that really just have it automatically put footers and headers and put watermarking on that. You can have that trigger in emails, you can have it trigger in documents, but sometimes you don't want specifically really strict controls on that. You just kind of want to automate let's put a watermark on this, or let's put, confidential at the bottom of all of the sheets on these documents. So having a quick way to do that, whether that be with automatic labeling or with a button someone can click in a Word doc, does significantly speed up the necessary controls in there, and it gets people more familiar with the process. After that, you have a more general business label. More recently, we're seeing a lot of customers kind of combine a general label and a non-business label. It's starting to turn more into a trend, really just to trim it down, because we're talking about your primary labels here. Then you also have your sub-labels that may have a breakdown, whether that be by department or by sensitivity group, or you may want to have labels that are only available to the management team, as an example. But the last two labels are really more for informing the user and your tools on what this type of data is. So if someone is, dealing with their pay stubs, it's their information, they should be able to label it theirs. And that really ensures that, let's say that user goes to leave the organization and you have insider risk management tracking what that user's doing, you can see where they've changed a label on something, made it theirs, and then you're really looking at what's happening with the information. And then you can really help ensure that they can take that data with them if it's theirs, as a good example. And you also may want to start considering layering in auto labeling where appropriate, especially with the super sensitive data. It is recommended that you don't just go full tilt on doing auto labeling, as you can very quickly lock yourself out of information. And there's usually a simulation period or a learning phase that you do want to go through in regards to that, and we can help kind of educate on that as well.
Julius, we had a question
yes.
come in, just if I can interrupt for a second. Is it possible to create a RAG facility in Azure such that file permissions are carried along through the chunking embedding vector DB process, such that users cannot use the RAG facility to indirectly interrogate files for which they are not permissioned?
So the answer is Copilot, right? Microsoft has kind of built that into Copilot. But if you're looking to use your own model, that is stuff that you do need to be aware of, especially if you're training models or you're doing some form of your own chunking. Once the model has learned it, once it's available in the embeddings process, it's available to the model. There's really a hard way to kind of restrict that. If you want to talk more specifically about kind of the AI tooling there, we can set you up with the group internally if you're having continual review with that, or if you want to come up with a more custom solution around that. We do have our own product called Ella, which is ECI's large language application, which would sit on top of any AI models that you want to have deployed, and gives you that compliance tooling and gives you that separation. So if you want to have users upload their own data or use their own data stores and have that pass through with chunking and etc., that is a really great platform to do it. Again, it sits on top of your models, so the data never actually goes directly to the model either, so you can really ensure your data security there. But it is a tool that we offer that does separate that, and then you can have separate data domains, or you can have individuals have their own data domains, and then they are only passing to the model information that's relevant for them, if that makes sense. But happy to have a separate call to talk through that solution. For data loss prevention, the policies really do need to be developed alongside. Really, the way to look at your policies is you start kind of from Microsoft 365 downward, if that makes some form of a sense, because everything in Microsoft 365 will be actioned first, is the way to look at that. Then it follows to devices taking action, then anything that comes over is a third-party connector, and then finally wherever data is running on a server-side connector that uses the agent from Purview, which used to be the Azure Information Protection Agent, which is being deprecated and now is being transitioned to either deploying a separate server to do that in transit, or whether you I forget what the new Microsoft solution is on the go forward, but essentially the on-prem stuff will be established via connector with the search and intelligence section. All of your policies in the beginning should be ran transparently and really without any non-enforcement, but you always want to have user chips on there. So what that means effectively is you really shouldn't be forcing, especially in the beginning, hey, this label needs to be on here, apply it. do this with this information. It should be informational to the end user where, hey, we notice that this document that you're creating contains PII. Here's the label that you should be using, and that helps educate the user about what the label does, as well as ensures that the user gets an action item to perform in order to be able to do that. Once you get that done, then you want to configure any of the third-party connectors or SaaS apps to tie into all of that. Because the way you build your policies, you can build them up, or you can have policies completely separate. With that, you can configure policies to be very broad, or where you just want to protect PII anytime it tries to move, or you can be as granular as you want, where if you want to protect specific account numbers, you want to create specific DLP rules on specific strings or specific data matches. That is stuff that can be done as well. And you can even restrict it to the user types, whether that be you don't want anybody in finance to be able to send this type of data outbound, and that's all driven through policies. When you start creating policies, there are two things you want to keep in mind: what you're protecting, whether that be sensitive information types, trainable classifiers, EDMs, SharePoint sites, etc. And then what are the workflows behind that? What do you want users to be able to do? Do you want the users to have just suggestions? Do you want to have a reroute in the rules so that if somebody tries to send a file, it goes to someone else for approval automatically for it then to leave and go outside? Do you want to be able to allow users to override with appropriate justifications? Do you want to force block it so that it's known to the user that's being blocked, or you just want to have some auditing or alerting on there? All of these are options that you have when you're creating your policies, and these policies can work together, they can work separately, and again, they can be built on specific data types or not. Data lifecycle management is a bit of a fun adventure. I realized that the slide didn't get updated correctly, so you're going to see data lifecycle management twice. I'll correct that before it goes outbound. But with data lifecycle management, there's two areas to look at. You have your data retention and your data disposition. A lot of clients don't realize that you get data retention with the enterprise licensing of Microsoft 365. You can retain that data for nearly as long as you would like. The only thing that's not retained forever are your admin audit logs. If you want to have any of your admin audit logs go beyond 1 year, or any of the advanced logging that you have available, that requires an add-on license, and then you can keep it up to 10 years or indefinitely. But with that, you want to make sure that you're matching your retention policies based on what is defined by the compliance teams. So if you're only supposed to keep data for 7 years, then you should have a retention policy in line with that. And those retention policies can be defined to be just mailboxes. You can have it just be data that's in SharePoint sites. You can have it data that's in Box. You can connect it to really wherever you would like. But again, you want to ensure that you're creating policies to match your retention. And then if you have any subsets of data that may have different requirements, that you're doing that as well. So if you have people that are with a different broker and you want to have their data stored forever, that's a separate rule and a policy that you can create specifically for those users, specifically for the data that they create around that. So those are options. With disposition, you have the ability to that slide is all types of broken. Data disposition is important on 3 key areas. Is any of the data that you do possess is discoverable. You do have attack surface reduction if you have Defender set up to be in active mode, so you can actively have it take action on events that are potentially occurring. And then you do want to be able to prune your data and prune kind of anything that is too old, so you're being mindful of Copilot or any other AI tools that you have in your space. With that, you can set that to be automatic. You can have that be a review process that kicks off automatically, so you don't have to force it on. And then you can, again, apply all of what I've mentioned here to completely separate sets of data types. When we start talking about shadow IT, I'll give you guys a little bit nicer slide. You start leaning into what's insider risk management, along as the Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud App piece. So this piece specifically requires that you have at least Defender for Endpoint deployed to endpoints in passive mode, and then you have the appropriate connectors turned on so that it's getting information from Intune, it's getting the data sets from Purview, and then all the portals are happy and talking together, so it can build a complete picture. Happy to demo that to anybody who's interested in seeing it in action, but once it's all connected and it's all working seamlessly, you can get really in-depth information on your endpoints. You can effectively turn your endpoints into scanning devices, where your endpoints are collecting data on what's going on the network, what's happening when someone goes home, what's going on in your office. Somebody plug in a rogue access point? Did somebody bring a home PC in and inadvertently plug it into the LAN? You can have all of your endpoints say, hey, I don't know what this device is. This is not defined as a trusted device for me. I'm going to block access. And when it does that, it blocks it across all of your endpoints. It's not, and it prevents it from being able to talk to those services. In addition to that, people at home increasingly have their own network attached storages. So what are you guys doing about that? With Defender for Endpoint and Shadow IT, Insider Risk Management, and et cetera configured, you can get alerts on that. You can get alerted if somebody has it. You can get alerts if someone tries to move data off your endpoint onto the net or onto a local device. It's all alerts that you can set up regarding to that. If you're worried about RFC 1912 addressing things like that, that's all stuff that's discoverable. It's all stuff that can be protected against. And then finally, there's the ability to do OAuth and Windows 365 registered app discovery. So you can see where you have users that have registered for applications, tried to add them, or are using your organizational account on another platform that they may not be authorized to use. With this, you can configure what's called app sanctioning and unsanctioning. There's another fancier name for it, but effectively you can configure your conditional access to match policies that you define where only apps that you sanction can be used, and that blocks it across your entire data estate. So if someone is on a server, if someone's on an endpoint and they're trying to get to a platform you don't trust or hasn't been vetted by the compliance team, or if you have a requirement that you only use platforms that have ISO 2701 27001 commitments or NIST requirements, you can ensure that other platforms that users are using are able to do that. Tim, I do see your question, so just to read it aloud. In terms of classification, assume PCI, PHI is automatic regex classification correct? How does it do with non-privacy standardized data like CUI, trade secret, sensitivity, perpetual, etc.? So a lot of what I'm talking about does use the built-in classifiers to identify that data. And when you create your labeling rules and your classification rules, you have the ability to train it. So you can say, here are our contracts. This is what they look like. I want these contracts to have its own classification type called contracts. And then anything that matches these automatically do this. So you can create rules around that. For trade secrets, proprietary data, as long as it's in a general structured format, or you know what the sentence formatting around it, or if you know what account numbers are, or etc., those are all things that policies can be built around. Whether you want to build just DLP rules around it, if you just want to do data labeling, if you just want to classify and identify it, you do have the options to do those. They're all trainable. It's a part of the E5 license is the only way to get that type of stuff. And then you're able to again identify that type of data and find it. And then that extends cross-platform, as I mentioned as well. So if you have a bunch of stuff floating in Box because you have a group in the organization that loves Box.com and uses that for external collaboration, you can again find out what's in that platform, see what's going on there. Is anybody storing PII or proprietary data inadvertently there, either by mistake or on purpose? And you can really find that and identify it. But good question. To continue to talk about insider risk management, with insider risk management, you have the ability to define alerts. You can connect it to an HR or a physical badging system if you have that integrated with Entra ID. That allows you that if you know Jimmy is leaving in 2 weeks and you said in the HR platform that he's put his 2-week notice in, you can configure rules around that. So you can say that now that Jimmy is an elevated user risk, so that he's no longer low risk, he's medium risk, and whenever he touches data with a certain label or a certain classification, automatically elevate his risk. Or you can have it where the last 2 weeks of Jimmy's employment, he has a hypersensitive alerting turned on, meaning you're seeing if he's trying to share data, if he's trying to do it internally or externally, and you can go as far as block him knowingly, you can block him unknowingly, you can have it where it has to go through an approval process to send the email outbound through his manager or someone else in the organization. So you can tie that all together so that if Jimmy now is being super risky, he's trying to offload stuff to Google through Gmail, you can block his badge, you can lock down his accounts, you can have it automatically take action, and then have forensic evidence behind it. So when you have Defender on there, even in passive mode, it has the ability to collect forensic information. So it identifies that his heightened risk, will take that, store it on the endpoint, and then when available, upload it to the portal so you can review it. And that can include snapshots, it'll include what's going on the endpoint, what IPs it's talking about, what web browser he has open, what websites he's going to, etc. So you can build a case in the event you need to, whether it be for litigation, further termination, legal action, etc. With that, you define your review process in that to continue the conversation. A lot of clients are de-anonymizing that. If you operate in a state that requires you to use anonymization, you can keep that on, but a lot of people are de-anonymizing it to speed up the resolute process. But you do want to make sure if you're de-anonymizing that you have excuse me, it's set up to notify users of that, so you're not doing it unbeknownst for legal reasons. And then with that, what I've mentioned is in the previous example is enabling adaptive protection to enable the forensic capture. So you can, again, figure out what's going on, and the adaptive protection will automatically take action or apply specific policies and rules based on user risk. That ties into what you're doing with Entra ID and ensuring you're calculating user risk and sign-in risk and device risk. That's all stuff that plays together and does tie into Purview. So if an endpoint gets at elevated risk, you can have certain action taken. If sign-in risk gets elevated, what do you want to do with that? And again, you define policies on that, not just with Entra, but with Intune. You define it with Defender and you define it with Purview. So again, you can ensure you're protected all the way across the estate, not just if this person should log in or not. Getting into communication compliance, everyone's also favorite topic. Do you want to be able to flag data that's there, whether that be based on sentiment? Do you have targeted harassment in your organization? Are you people flagging things for regulatory or compliance needs when there? Or are you looking for stuff that has inappropriate content? If you want to look for that or you have a requirement to, it's all stuff that can be defined and that can look anywhere in your state as well. But you do, again, want to define review and a process behind that. And then if you are enabled for Copilot for Office 365, you do want to ensure that you've enabled the policies around the interactions, and you want to ensure that you are regularly reviewing that. Whether you want to do it to get ahead of compliance, you want to do it to ensure that users are using the tool appropriately. It is recommended that you do that review. Happy to talk to anybody about creating those policies or what it looks like and what you should be thinking about when you're reviewing those, as it is important as the tool is there. As it does help in ensuring it's being used correctly and people are getting what they should out of the tool as well. Last two slides here for compliance assessments. Here are the most popular that are there that are available right in the platform. So you can do NIST AI risk ones, you can do CIS foundations, you can do all the way from CIS IG 1 through 3. There is this foundational security one, there's HIPAA and high-tech ones if you're interested, the FINRA cyber checklist, SEC 174A, and ISO 27001. So again, they're built-in assessments that are available to the tool, and as long as you have everything else turned on to talk to Defender and talk to Purview, these are assessments that are available to you. You get 3 in total with the E5 license. You can license additional ones, so if you want to run it annually or quarterly or etc., or have the tool built in to give you regular reports on that on a monthly basis or etc., it's just a quick vulnerability add-on license that you can do per user, and you'll get the necessary information that you want from those, and then you're able to action them. So the assessments don't remediate, they just alert, but they do give you the information required to remediate those. So it's not just you have to then Google or go to Tenable or use a different platform. It's in there, tells you what you need to correct, and gives you the option to say, yes, I've corrected it, and then have it check and validate the following month or the following run, or you can provide reasoning as to why you're not adopting it, or if you have a third-party tool to do it. So you have flexibility in those as well. Finally, for those who are unaware, the Microsoft Purview AI Hub exists. I do recommend that you go in there and take a peek at it. Here is a very brief overview and some key features there. It does act as a centralized management tool, and it does have the ability to look at other AI tools. So if you're using Bard or you're using any of the meta models or etc., you can have it configured to look at what users are doing in those platforms. It does require you to have Defender enabled with passive mode, be enrolled in Purview, in Intune, everything I've been mentioning throughout this. So there are several steps to get that in and in place, can help you in that journey to get it there. If you don't want to get that far into it and you just want to see what people are doing, You can deploy the browser plugin for the various browsers, or if you want to do it with Microsoft Edge, the preferred browser, you can have that all turned on by default and have it action it from that regards. And then with the AI Hub, there's some built-in security tools, so it does keep track of what users are doing on those platforms. You have the ability to gain insights, look at policies, and compare data and apply them there. There is a NIST AI referendum ruling that you can run through, and it does go through what to create, what to set up, so you could meet those. And then it does provide you proactive monitoring again, so that you can look at what users are doing. It'll keep track if users are trying to take data that are labeled or classified and put it into other tools. And again, you can build rules around that, again, if you identify something that somebody shouldn't be doing. So with all of that being said, happy to answer any of the questions you guys have. If you want to connect separately, happy to talk with you about your specific needs and help you in that journey as well. We have a full team here that specialize in Purview, so happy to bring them along as well if you have questions that I can't answer for some reason. But outside of that, Jen?
I think that is it, Julius. I'm looking in both the chat and the QA, and I do not see any extra questions coming in. Unless anyone has any, I think we're good to wrap up. So we will make this recording available. We will also have the deck available for all of you. And as Julius said, all of us are here to help if you have any questions after this. Thanks, Julius. Appreciate the time. Appreciate all of you for attending.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.